Sonarworks, full confidence in sound. We'll see about that. Hey there, YouTube. It's Bobby. I have a fun video for you today. Sonarworks sent me a free copy of their room correction software for me to dissect and figure out if it's actually going to help you, the home studio owner, make better sounding mixes. So I'm going to show you how to measure your room, how simple it is using the included microphone that they gave me. And we're going to walk through the software, and we're going to actually put Sonarworks to the test and measure the in-room response to see how good it actually is. This is going to be a really good video, so be sure to stick with me all the way to the end. By the way, I have a bunch of awesome freebies that you can download in the description, including a really awesome mixing cheat sheet that tells you my favorite starting positions on EQs and compressor settings for all the different elements in a song. So I think you're going to find that super helpful. And you also see a link to all the software that I'm going to be using in this video today, so you can check it out. So you might be wondering, what is Sonarworks, or what is this SoundID thing? Well, if we go to the website, it is a way to create, mix, and deliver with confidence. It's basically just a program that helps to acoustically EQ correct your room. So when you play your music back through your monitors or you're listening to music, it is adjusted to counteract the problems that are caused by the shape of your room acoustically. Now, this is not an excuse to not acoustically treat your room. That should always be done first. It's going to help you get the best stereo image possible out of your speakers. But EQ or room correction is something that you're going to want to do at some point to really squeeze the best performance out of your speakers. So SoundID is both a standalone app and then also works as a digital audio workstation plugin. I highly recommend that when you do use this, you actually use the standalone app, because you're going to want to use the system-wide drivers. That is important because you're going to need to learn the sound of your speakers when you have this new profile that you make that's acoustically fixing the problems in your room. So if you're not always listening to music through that profile, it's not going to help you that much. Okay? It's not something you just put on when you're mixing music. You always want to have it on. So they say even the best speakers can't compensate for acoustics in a poorly designed room. That's correct. They can't. And in fact, all rooms are going to be poorly designed because they're in our homes, and our homes were not designed for studio or music listening. And even if they were, they're still going to have problems. So we have to do some sort of correction. The cool thing about Sonarworks is actually they also have headphone correction. So when you have headphones, they inherently have some issues too acoustically, and then Sonarworks will apply a correction filter to that to kind of help flatten or fix the acoustic problems of headphones. So if you mix primarily in a home studio with speakers, but then you go on the road for some reason, or you're away for the holidays, but you still want to work on music, you can just use your headphones that are also EQ corrected by Sonarworks. So the sound that you are used to hearing in your home studio is going to be similar to your corrected headphones. And that's going to help you translate your music better to other sound sources when you're on the road. All right, let's talk about how to get Sonarworks set up and installed on your computer. The first thing is you want to run the SoundID reference measure program. This is going to go analyze your room at your listening position and then automatically make adjustments to the sound so that it sounds as flat as possible. And by flat, I mean close to whatever their target profile is. They don't really tell you what that is, but you can assume that it's probably pretty flat. Okay, so let's click Get Started. It's going to ask you what your speaker configuration is. Almost every single one of you will be 2.0. I have subwoofers in my studio as well. It is still 2.0. It'll work either way. It's going to act as a continuous sound source. So 2.0 is fine even if you have subs. So we need to take the microphone they gave us, is right here, this bad boy, and we're going to connect it and then make sure that phantom power is on. Okay, so we're going to take an XLR connector, plug it right on in the back, connect the other end to your interface, plugs right on in, and then we need to enable phantom power. All right, so I plugged it into channel 10. So we're going to go to the channel 10 and turn on phantom power. So now this is my microphone I'm talking into now, and then this is this one. So it's working. Just make sure you have the gain up, otherwise it's not going to send the signal to Sonarworks when you're doing this. All right, so we can check that box. Next, your input and output are routed to the same device. That, for most of us, if you're just working on a single interface, is automatically taken care of for you. This only applies if you have like outboard converters or you have multiple interfaces that are all linked together. But for most of us, this will be totally fine. And then we want to make sure our microphone signal can't be heard through our speakers. Why is that important? Whatever you say or whatever sound goes in the microphone also comes out of the speakers. It's going to throw off Sonarworks' ability to measure our listening position. So you need to make absolutely sure that nothing is coming out from the microphone out of your speakers. Okay, so I verified that I can't hear anything, so we're good there. And just to kind of show you how to avoid that, on your interface's driver setting, you want to turn off any direct monitoring. Okay, so I have my fader set to -infinity. If it's up here, I can hear my voice coming out of those speakers, so I got to turn that off. Keep it moving. Right, so select my microphone input. Okay, so if I tap this, just like they show in this cute little video right here, tap, tap, nothing's happening. It's because this is the wrong channel. I'm plugged into analog 10. So if I tap now, there we go. Input signal is detected. So we're good to go. Next. Okay, we're going to enter the SoundID reference number. It's right here. So you just enter that here. And what it's going to do is going to contact the database, pull down your calibration file. Here it is. This is really important because otherwise your measurements are going to be off by almost 4 or 5 dB on the top end. You don't want that. We want a nice flat profile when we're done. All right, so now we need to assign our outputs. So let's say, for example, this was the default. You're going to select your interface. Mine is a Fireface USB. If we hit test, I'm not hearing anything out of these speakers. It's because it's trying to send the audio to the wrong channel. Okay, so if you have in the back of your interface, your monitors plugged into channels 1 and 2, make sure that your outputs 1 and 2 are selected here. In my case, I'm using this AES L and R. So now when I hit play,
left speaker, right speaker.
That's so nice. There it is. We got it. Let's keep going. I'm going to reduce the gain because they told me to.
Please adjust the volume of your output device. My voice should sound at normal conversation volume.
Sounds pretty normal and conversational. All right, so then they tell you a bunch of stuff to do. They say, get crap out of the way, hold the microphone in your hand, or you can use a stand. And they give you nice little video animations just in case you're confused. You cannot screw this up. They show you how to do everything. Something you do want to pay attention to is when they say to have the microphone in the center of your listening position, make sure that's at ear height, okay? Because you're tuning the room to be perfect for your listening position. Okay, if you move around the room, it's going to sound weird, but we want to make sure the listening spot is the best. Okay, and you listen at ear height. You don't listen down here or up here, okay? So make sure that when you're holding that microphone in between your speakers or pointing it or whatever, that it's at ear height. All right, let's start measuring the speakers. Got to zoom out because you won't see it. So we're going to start listening position. That's not one bit annoying. We got that taken care of. I'm in the United States, so I'm going to choose imperial. So I like inches and not centimeters. You're going to shove the microphone at the mid-range driver, but not get in the way because you don't want the sound waves to reflect off your body and get back into the microphone somehow, okay? And we want to make sure we're close, less than an inch away. Let's do this.
Stay where you are. Measurements in progress. Left speaker done.
Woo! Do the right speaker.
Measurements in progress.
Okay, really quickly. So you saw that I got this high noise error. Turns out the way I have my system set up, because I have those subwoofers included in with my main monitors, I have all this stuff running through a mini DSP, which has a high pass filter on those speakers. You have to disable your high pass filter for your main monitors. Otherwise, Sonarworks, when it sends that signal to your woofer, it's missing all those frequencies, and so it thinks there's high noise. So it took me a while to troubleshoot that, but if you run into that problem and you have like 2 subwoofers like I do, or you have some external crossover network, you need to make sure that your monitors that you're calibrating are full range.
Right speaker done.
All right, so far so good. Yeah, that's like dead on. It's about like 3 feet 2 inches away. Perfect. Continue. All right, so we're gonna put the microphone in the listening spot now. All right. All right, now we're doing some room stuff. So this is a fun game. We got 37 measurements to do. This is gonna take a while. Probably speed this part up. There's a lot. So this is what Sonarworks thinks my room looks like. So it says there's a dip right around 3K here, and it kind of runs off in the high end, and then we have this weird thing around 100, and then I got tons of bass, which is true. All we have to do now is just click Save and Finish, and then we'll save this Raytown Productions YouTube video. Save. So now we can apply that calibration to our speakers, apparently 3 different ways. We can calibrate it using a desktop application, which I recommend doing because then it becomes system-wide, meaning you're going to hear the music being played back through the correction as long as you have the Sonarworks driver selected as your output device in Windows. And if you just have it in your DAW as a plugin, anytime you're referencing stuff outside of your DAW, you don't get that correction. Okay, now that we made that profile using the Sonarworks Measure program, now we're going to open up the SoundID reference software that comes with Sonarworks. So it looks like this. All right, so what we need to do first is add an output. And all this is just what is the output channel that I'm using for my music. So I use this AES channel.
Left, right.
Okay, so we test it, we hear it. So we're good to go. I'm going to leave this set up for a virtual Windows audio driver. If this doesn't work for you, you can try the other. They have Windows audio device insert. Okay, then we just add the output. Okay, so here is our speakers. Now we can add that profile that we just created using the measure. Open existing profile, and we're going to select our project that we made. There we go. So now what Sonarworks is doing is this is the frequency response of my room at all those different listening positions averaged together, and we can choose to select a different type of target. Okay, so if you want to correct it to be flat, like acoustically flat, you select this. They have Dolby Atmos music, some custom targets, or translation checks. So if you want to check it out in like a car, for example, they have a bunch of different options here. It's pretty cool. So 3 different cars, headphones, you can check them on that model the headphones. They have laptop speakers, smartphones. So anything you would need to check your mix on, you can do it all in-house using this software. So you don't have to run out to the car, which is pretty cool. Now we have a few other options down here at the bottom. When we use this software, we're going to be adding some inherent latency. So this can be problematic if, let's say, for example, you're trying to record guitars or something and you're playing music back through monitors. Okay, the audio is going to be about 10 milliseconds off, which we see here, so output device. So 10 milliseconds might be a short enough time where you're not really going to notice it, but in a perfect world, you're going to want this to be 0. So when you're tracking and recording, you might want to actually turn this off, and when you mix or listen back, you might want to turn it on. Just a consideration if you have trouble with that. Or if you do video content creation, like this YouTube video, I probably shouldn't have this on when I'm editing the video because I could mismatch the audio to the video, which I have done before. We can choose a 0 latency filter type. We can choose a mixed phase or a linear phase. So linear phase doesn't change any of the phase response of your speakers. Normally, this probably doesn't matter that much. You can try changing the different filter types if you want, and then listen back. Now, if you do choose to use linear phase or mixed phase filtering, be aware that you're adding a bunch of latency. Now we're adding an extra 45 milliseconds, and you can absolutely hear that. Okay, so it's just something that you want to keep in mind. The other thing that could potentially be a problem is that when you use linear phase filters, you can introduce what's called pre-ringing. So if you have a lot of bass-heavy music, sometimes you can create like a little fade into like a big, powerful kick transient or anything with a lot of bass energy. And that's just an artifact that happens when you use these type of filters. So if you think you kind of notice this like weird sucking sound, then maybe you want to try changing your filter type from linear phase to mixed or zero latency. So you can do is play back music that you really like and switch between these different filter types. And if there's one that really speaks to you and you think sounds awesome, just go with that. Don't overthink it. And if you need zero latency for recording or editing or whatever, you can always come in here and just hit that. There's a listening spot correction. So if you want to go in and adjust like the delays that Sonarworks has calculated, you can do that in here. I don't mess with that at all. You can limit the amount of correction that it will do. So sometimes it might try to boost a null that you have in your room by like 12 dB or something. And sometimes it doesn't really help the sound because it's just an acoustic problem in your room. And so you can introduce distortion in your speakers. And so to prevent all that, what you can do is say, sorry, Sonarworks, you can only add 6 decibels of gain max. And then they also give you different options for low frequencies, like how you want to adjust for that as well. And you can do the same processing to the high frequencies as well. They have this safe headroom option. I think this is a really good option to keep on. So safe headroom is going to calculate how much it's adding to the signal and then reduce it down by a safe amount so that you don't run the risk of accidentally clipping your monitors. Really, really important feature, and I definitely recommend using this. Now, I mentioned earlier that I tend to like the sound of the bass being a little bit louder and more aggressive because I want to feel like a kick drum and stuff like that when I'm mixing music. And if I don't have that much energy coming out of my speakers because Sonarworks thinks it needs to be flatter, then sometimes I overdo the low end of the songs that I'm mixing. So a good way to fix that is to actually go into the Sonarworks software, the SoundID reference software, and we can put our own target. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So down here, if we go back to the main window, we can go to custom target. We can adjust the target curve. So for example, let's say I want the low end to be boosted. We can come down here, grab this marker, and we can just raise up our target. Okay. So you can dial it in exactly how you want. And what I think sounds awesome to me and keeps me from overmixing the low end of my songs is setting a low shelf at about 100 hertz. And I actually boost it by at least 6 dB. Also, I tend to be pretty sensitive in the high frequencies. So to keep me from reducing the top end too much on the songs I'm mixing and mastering, I actually lower the high frequencies so that when I'm mixing, I raise them up a little bit more. And it's a correction that took me a long time to figure out, but I find that about minus 0.7 dB per octave is like the magic sweet spot starting from 1K on. So down here, you can control the amount of dry and wet. So this is just going to attenuate all of the EQ correction that's being performed on your speakers so that if it sounds a little bit too much, it makes your speakers sound maybe too sterile or something, you can just dial this back. Or, for example, let's say you don't want it to correct the top end, you can actually grab this bar and pull it out, and it won't do any adjustments to that top end. So if you're like me and you want all the bass energy there and you don't want Sonarworks doing weird stuff, you can grab the left side, drag it over, and it's not going to do any attenuation of those sub-frequencies anymore. So you have a lot of different control over how to get the exact sound you need to make sure your mixes perform awesome wherever they go. So at this point now, it's a good time to go and pull up some of your favorite songs that you know what they sound like very, very well. Play them quietly, play them loudly, all through this new profile, and see if you like what Sonarworks did for the correction. So I'm going to go do that right now. I'll be right back. Okay, some thoughts after I listened to the Sonarworks room correction stuff. Let me bring you back. When I went to the flat target, it takes all the low energy out that I'm used to hearing, and it does really flatten things out. It kind of makes it almost sound sterile to me, and I wasn't really digging it. So this custom target that I made, like I said, again, it's boosting the low frequencies, was what it needed to make it sound exciting and what I was used to hearing in my studio before everything got corrected by Sonar. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a download to this target curve in the description. So if you want to go and grab that, go and check that out and then load this into Sonarworks SoundID reference. If you have it, see if you like it. I don't know, you might really dig it. Some other things I checked was the translation check. And what I found is that the majority of these these different settings are kind of worthless. So if you go to car settings and you try a few of these out, it really changes the sound so much that it doesn't even resemble a car. To me, it felt so disconnected from what the sound is like in my car that I couldn't relate to any of these. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend any of these car choices. Headphones were kind of confusing as well. Might be helpful to kind of find one of these that you think sounds consistent to what you hear when you put in earbuds, but I really didn't resonate with any of these either. The laptop speakers were interesting. I like the idea of it. I thought this is kind of nice to maybe find one of these to listen to if you want to check the mid-range of your mix, because it gets rid of all the bass energy and really tames the high energy, so you're kind of focused in on that mid-range. And if you can get that right, your songs will translate everywhere. But what I actually found were the best were actually the two under studio speakers. I personally use a mix cube in my studio, and I thought it sounded pretty similar to like the tonal characteristics of it. And then also the they call it NS11. I'm guessing this is an NS10, which was like the industry standard studio monitor forever. Pretty neutral sounding speaker. Again, it emphasizes the mid-range. So what I would say, if you do want to check your mix on another source, is try maybe one of these two, and don't just go through and just click all these different profiles as you're going. The sounds are so different that it's just going to be confusing for you, and you're never really going to understand if one of these, helps you translate your song in the real world. But if you check it against maybe just one other source that you kind of learn how it sounds, then I think it could be helpful. Okay, so put on like your NS11 reference, and then go and listen to a lot of music. So get a sense for how that sounds in that profile. And then when you jump back to your song, you'll know right away if that mid-range is kind of off or not. Now what I'm going to do is actually measure my room running through this software to see what the actual target is for Sonarworks, right? They say that it's flat here, but that doesn't really show you what the actual in-room response is, right? It's not what's actually happening. I figured I'd go and grab all my equipment that I've been using to tune my studio over the years, and I'm going to use Room EQ Wizard to actually see what the in-room response is and how much Sonarworks has actually improved my sound. So this is going to be really cool. I haven't seen anybody do any of this stuff on YouTube yet. And so for me to perform this analysis, I'm going to use Room EQ Wizard and a U-mic USB microphone. I have links to all this stuff in the description if you want to check it out or do your own analysis. This is free software, so give it a shot. Can't hurt. So the first thing we are going to do is just measure the room as is, no correction, to see what it looks like. And then we're going to enable Sonarworks, flat target, and then enable Sonarworks with my EQ correction, my target curve, and then see what that looks like. That was so loud. Holy crap. 100 decibels. Yeah, I believe it. That took like 3 years off my life. Let me check it again at a reasonable level. 77. Much better. All right, so to do this, I have to put the microphone where I'm sitting, so stand by. Microphone is armed and dangerous. Okay, so we're going to disable this room correction software. Now let's measure the room. Here we go. Okay, here is the room. Quick crash course in this. This is the y-axis. This is the sound pressure level of the volume of the different frequencies, which you can see along the x-axis here. So this is 20 hertz. This all the way to the right is 20,000 hertz. So this is the full audio range. And then you can see that it's not totally flat, right? We have like 100 dB here, 95, and then we drop all the way down to 76 decibels here. So there's a big hole in my room right around 110 hertz. Okay, so if you're mixing and there's a bass note played at this, it's going to sound 30 dB quieter than like the kick drum if it's in the sub region. Same here. There's this big imbalance right around 173 hertz. Okay, that's like someone has an EQ and they pushed it up 10 dB or turned it down 10 dB in these different spots in the frequency spectrum. So this is not that flat. There can be a lot of improvements, and I have a ton of acoustic treatment. So it's not due to lack of acoustic treatment. This is just what happens in a room that you have to then try to do your best to EQ correct or do some phase correction to fix these problems. You'll see that there's this weird thing going on down here. I wouldn't worry too much about stuff that occurs over maybe 2 or 3K, because this is like high frequency information. This is going to be stuff kind of bouncing off me because I'm not out of the way or off of this table, or maybe just the interference from the two speakers themselves right here. So if I did one at a time, this would completely go away. Try to ignore this. Let's focus on all this other stuff. So let's enable the room correction. We'll start with the flat target. Okay, so we have it set to flat, and let's perform the next measurement. Okay, so this looks pretty good, right? This is much better than this, right? This is my room originally, and this is after the Sonarworks correction. So they did a pretty good job. What's interesting to see right here is that if you take a look, this has a natural taper in the high frequencies. So Sonarworks already integrates maybe some degree of attenuation of those high frequencies to keep it nice and flat. And you can also see that from about 3K all the way to like 40 hertz is really flat. And then we have a little bit of rise. I don't know if that's Sonarworks' target. That's a little bit high in this very sub-region, or if that's just my room, but it's interesting nonetheless. If we overlay both of these on top of each other, I mean, it's fixing it by, this is just like a relative level. Let's change this to SPL. So the highest frequency and the lowest frequency, just to kind of get a range. So that is a difference of 21.03 decibels. So it'd be plus or minus 10 dB without any Sonarworks correction. Let's take a look at just Sonarworks. So we're going to do the same measurement. We're going to see the difference between the loudest and softest peak. Okay, we're going to ignore this part down here because I think that was intentional. So the lowest peak is in orange, is right here. So Sonarworks has improved it. So now the difference between the loudest and quietest is minus 14. So we've gone down to plus or minus 7 dB. Not only that, but it's also like pretty darn flat. So that's, I would say, an impressive improvement. Yeah, going from this to this, it certainly did a lot of fixing in this region, which would be really important because the snare drum lives here, but it didn't solve the problem, right? We still have a null here. Okay, this is most likely a crossover problem or a phase-related problem with my system because I have subwoofers and monitors. And there's a crossover point right around here where this is causing some cancellation. While it fixed a lot of things, it can't fix everything, right? And if we look at this, guess what? It's still plus or minus, almost plus or minus 6 dB. So it's still a problem that I'm gonna have to worry about when I have Sonarworks. But I think it's a huge improvement. All right, let's check my custom target curve. All right, so if we compare the two, you can see it definitely lowered the top end a little bit more. Okay, not too much. Probably by about 2 dB, like I put it. And then that low end came way up, okay, which is what I like. But overall, I think it's doing a pretty good job. And when it says that the target is flat, it really does mean flat, except it does attenuate a little bit of the top end, as we can see here. So Sonarworks does seem to work pretty well to correct your room response without a lot of effort, right? We just install the software, then it guides us through that really easy measuring process. They include a microphone. You don't really have to know a lot about acoustics. It just fixes the problems. I also like the option of having the ability to adjust your target curve, so you can go in and make some adjustments depending on how you want your target to sound. And it's totally okay to not have it perfectly acoustically flat. And in fact, there's a lot of studios and a lot of mixing and mastering engineers that have their own targets where they make adjustments in the high end and the low end to help them dial in music so that it translates really well all over the place. So don't ever feel like you're stuck with the flat target response that Sonarworks gives you. You also have the option to dial back the amount of correction performed overall. So I have a question for you. Do you do any type of room correction in your home studio? What kind of software are you using and what are your results? I'd love to hear about it. Please drop a comment below and let me know. So I want to remind you that in the description, I have links to all the different software that I used in this video. And then also you can download my target profile, but I also have a free downloadable cheat sheet to help you find the best starting position for mixing different elements in a song. I have all of my favorite settings built into that cheat sheet, so I think you're going to find it super valuable. With that, I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. My name is Bobby Balo. I'm the mixing and mastering engineer at Rayton Productions, and I hope to see you in another video.